Shalom, Bethel family. It is Thursday. Once again, time to share a review of our Torah discussion from synagogue this past Saturday. This past Saturday was Parshat Ve-etchanon from the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. And it was also Shabbat Nachamu, the first Shabbat following Tisha B'Av, when we start reading passages of comfort that will connect us all the way to Rosh Hashanah. And interestingly, in Parshat Ve-etchanon, we have the Shema and the V'ahavta, the first paragraph of what we now know as the Shema, as well as the Ten Commandments. And it's an interesting question how the Shema, as we have it, one paragraph from this Torah portion, another paragraph from another part of Deuteronomy, and another paragraph from Bamidbar, how those passages came to be the Shema and came to be so lasting, while at the same time, the Ten Commandments, the Aseret Hadibrot, or the 10 utterances, fell completely out of use in the prayer service. And we introduced this question by actually talking about another question, which is, how are these things so lasting? These texts from the Torah from 3,500 years ago, they stay with us while so much changes. We actually talked about the synagogue and how things are changing in synagogues all over the country. I mentioned so many things that were once central to a synagogue's function are now becoming obsolete. For example, or having to change in order to stay relevant. For example, the library, which was so central to what a synagogue was, is now really just a secondary function because you can get most of the books that would be there on Amazon, or most of the information that would be in there or that most people would be interested in is available online. Another institution that came up was the gift shop. There was a time when if you wanted any kind of Judaica, ritual item or a beautiful piece of Jewish art, you went to a sisterhood gift shop in the synagogue. Now again, because of the internet, we can order so many of those things online in a wider variety, and often even for less money than a regular shop could offer it. You could even make an argument, although I hope you would not, that parts of the role of the rabbi are becoming obsolete, as people can, as I like to call it, use Rav Google when they have a question, and they often will first turn to the internet even before calling the rabbi to ask a question. So things, and this is not anything new to synagogues. Synagogues actually adapt and have been adapting incredibly quickly over the course of the last 100 years in this country. When you see a synagogue 100 years ago, so many of its functions so many of the functions we now take for granted would not be there. Even something as basic as, say, religious school, which were usually not housed in a synagogue, but there was an independent Talmud Torah where all the kids from a neighborhood or a city would go to for education. So synagogues change so much. So in the context of such a dynamic institution as the synagogue, how is it that these passages have such lasting power? What makes them different that gives them that staying power? To explore that, we actually turn to the Talmud that tells us about where we get the custom of reciting the Shema, and in fact, in the beginning of the Ten Commandments as well. And there's a Mishnah in Tamid that says, when describing the service, what they would say in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, a couple of thousand years ago, say the appointed priest said to them, say one blessing before the Shema, and they blessed it, and then they recited the 10 Commandments, the Shema, the Vahaya im Shemoah, and the Vayomer. So what we now know as the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. They also blessed the people with a few other blessings. Right? So the Talmud, later in Tractate Brachot, is commenting on that. And it says, Rav Yehuda said, that Shmuel said, even in the outlying areas outside the temple, they wanted to recite the 10 Commandments in this manner every day, right? So this is how the temple service started to become our prayer. Excuse me. They started saying these prayers that they were doing in the temple, even in the outlying areas. But They had already abolished the recitation of the Ten Commandments due to the grievance of the heretics. Right? So what's the grievance of the heretics? People argued that, since we're saying the Ten Commandments must be the only ones that are important. And in fact, the other 603 commandments we don't have to worry about them. It's these 10 that they say in the temple that are the most important. And by the way, the rabbis, knew one group that they did not accept who said this famously and who kept it, and that's the Christians. Right? So when Christianity adopted the New Testament, it said of the Old Testament, the only things that we have to stick to as commandments are the 10. So maybe this was a polemic there against the Christians, or maybe just in general, right? But what's interesting is that the Ten Commandments by this time had fallen out of being said, even it seems, in the temple. So one theory of why the Shema became the Shema, right? 3 separate paragraphs from 3 different places, seemingly about 3 different topics, combined out of order in order to become what we now know as the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. Some say that actually that the recitation of those paragraphs were in and of itself also a refutation of the grievance of the heretics. Now, how so? Well, the 10 Commandments appear to be more important than all the other commandments if they're the ones being said. But the Shema comes to counterbalance that, because if you think about what the 3 paragraphs of the Shema are really about, the first line is about the oneness of God, but the rest of it is about the oneness of Jewish ritual, right? The first paragraph of the Shema establishes the relationship with God, God's oneness, and that we have a loving relationship with God. But the second paragraph defines that relationship through mitzvot, through certain actions that we are supposed to take and do in order to meet our obligations of the relationship. Every relationship has obligations. This is defining the obligations of our relationship between the Jewish people and God by mitzvot. And then the third paragraph with the tzitzit reminds us exactly what those mitzvot are and that we have to do them all. That's the symbolism of the tzitzit. And the rabbis also mentioned that there were a number of other mitzvot represented within the third paragraph of the Shema. So how did the Shema get to be what it is? It was compiled, perhaps, one theory says, as a counterbalance to the 10 Commandments. Now, ultimately, seems not to have worked, and the 10 Commandments dropped out completely. But it is interesting to me, and I think worth mentioning, how often the rabbis went back to the time of the Beit HaMikdash to get the references for our prayers, right? It was during temple times, it seems, that the Shema was arranged this way, and the rabbis kept our prayer service that way, always referencing to that older thing. And that brings us back to our initial question of why these things have such lasting power. How are they different from all the other things that come and go over the millennia, and even sometimes over just a decade or two in our synagogues and our Jewish life? And it's that they refer back to Jewish ritual and Jewish custom. It refers back to mitzvot, and it refers back to memory. Right? This Shabbat was Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort. And it's no question that Jews, when we want comfort, we turn to our communal memory, right? Back even thousands of years to the time of the temple. And we turn to our community itself. We turn to our ability to be together. And that's what the mitzvot represent. And that's what the Shema really is. It is not so much a declaration about God as it is a definition of our relationship with God. A communal relationship based on mitzvot, based on these actions that have been with us since the time of the temple. Now, here we are on a Shabbat, remembering what was and what we lost, and it's still in that memory, that shared togetherness and that ability to do ritual together where we find our comfort. And that never changes, because that is the backbone of Judaism. Communal memory and communal ritual is the backbone of Judaism. That's why when someone has a loss, we come together for a Shiva minyan, for a communal ritual of, of remembrance. That's why on the high holidays, on the day that we are most shamefaced and should want to be alone and embarrassed, we come together in our largest gathering of the year to be together in our review, in our cheshbon hanefesh, in our review of our sins and our missteps of the last year. It is all coming together. It's all about coming together in ritual. That is the backbone of Judaism. No matter what else changes about our institutions, about our synagogues, about our leadership, about where we live or how we define ourselves, that is the constant. That stays the same. And that's represented by these sacred texts, by the Shema, yes, also by the Aseret Hadibrot, which kind of snuck its way back into the Siddur at the very beginning. Many Siddurs will have it as one of the passages of Torah study at the beginning of the morning prayers. When it comes right down to it, on the Shabbat of Comfort and on these 7 weeks of comfort, it is up to us to remember how much we need each other, how much we are connected by our communal memory of loss and of triumph, of experience. All of that is where we come together as Jews and find our our eternity, our immortality. That is what links us to our ancestors even 3,500 years ago, and God willing will link us to our progeny 3,500 years from now. We can be a link in that chain based on memory, based on communal ritual, and that is why the Shema is the way it is, and that, I hope, is something we can all embrace as we move forward, looking for opportunities to come together here at Bethel, at the synagogue, and in our personal lives to share meaningful moments of togetherness. With that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom for the coming Shabbat, and look forward to catching up with you soon.